In this video, 6 tips for better street photography composition. What up? Welcome back to the channel. I thought I'd make a quick video on the topic of composition when it comes to street photography, and these 6 tips in this quick video will hopefully help you become more consistent in your street photography work. Of course, this is a field that takes years to get better at. There's no real shortcuts, but let me give you 6 shortcuts. Alright, tip number 1. This is one of the things that really helped me get at least a little bit more consistent every time that I went out to take street photos. You know, there's so many different elements you can focus on when it comes to street photography, but I think the most important element, at least if you're taking photos that are supposed to look good, is the lighting. So when I started composing my street photos with the lighting as the first building block of my image, meaning that I would start with good lighting, I would start with determining a spot on the street that had the potential to have good lighting. That's a lot of light, all right. I'm just trying to keep that in mind, waiting for a subject. And then trying to add all those other components, that is when I started to get a lot more consistent. And when I started paying attention to recognizing good light first, that meant that at least all of my photos would look nice, which is a pretty decent starting point for then building an even better image that has meaning or storytelling. Just some examples of good lighting. If you like to do daytime photography, then obviously the sun is your biggest source of lighting. And in daytime photography, the interesting thing is that the angle of the sun, meaning the time of day, whether it's early morning or close to sunset or middle of the day, you're always going to have slightly different lighting in different parts of the city. So pay close attention to that. Then if you're doing night photography, finding good lighting is a little bit different. Now you're looking for sources like neon lights, some strong sources of backlight, often just cars that are passing by can serve as interesting lighting, but a lot of times it is street lights, advertising billboards, things like that provide a lot of the lighting elements. Either way, it's funny because these are things that everybody sees, but if you don't really think about them, you don't necessarily notice them the same way. But once you make the mental switch to start looking for lighting first, that's when good things start to happen in photography. Add foreground or add depth. I'm just gonna play a clip from one of my recent vlogs that really demonstrated this very simple trick in a very easy to understand way, hopefully. Okay, here we're about to see me take 2 photos. The first one is not optimal because there's no foreground, and I've also blocked the color contrast in the background. The second one, I've moved just a couple of steps closer to the puddle, adding a reflective surface closer to the foreground of the composition. I've also have a better background with the color contrast that is not blocked by our subject. So just a simple 2-meter step slightly to the left and slightly closer to the puddle improves our composition massively because there's depth of composition, foreground and background. Let me show you a couple more photos with a more 3-dimensional similar composition effect. For this composition trick in particular, wider angle lenses tend to be better. I'm using a 28. For these, a 35 would also work. For more telephoto lens, adding depth would be a different kind of way. For example, having a blurry subject in the foreground of the photo, but it's definitely a different type of depth effect. Number 3, add color contrast. And when adding color contrast, you can utilize the environment to find ways to add it. Again, let me show you one clip from a video that I shot recently to show this tip in practice. On this photo shoot, I realized that buses are basically moving sources of colorful light. So all we have to do is wait for the bus to pass at the right moment. And we've turned a blander photo into a much more colorful result. Now, color contrast obviously is warm and cold color contrast. The classical teal and orange, or is it teal and orange? I even forgot what the stereotypical one is. Blue and orange, just warm and cold in general, looks pleasing to the human eye. And again, if that is one of the building blocks of your photography, at least helps you get a little bit more consistent, at least getting photos that are aesthetically pleasing. But not every scene will obviously have color contrast. But when you consciously start figuring out ways to add color contrast, it just makes your workflow more intentional. You know what to look for, and therefore it just helps you get more consistent in your results. You can even do this in post. For example, one thing that I like to do quite often is when I shoot night photos, well, I like a blue-white balance, a blue tone to my photos. And if I already know that I'm gonna make the photo blue in post, then all I need to do is actually only look for the warm colors when I'm shooting. And that is one really easy way to add color contrast. It of course also works in the opposite way. If you know your primary color is gonna be warm, look for blue or cold colors while you're shooting. Here's a couple of photos that I've taken that feature color contrast, but to be honest, I might be able to put my entire portfolio here. Number 4, raindrops and depth. You know how I talked about depth earlier? One really good way to add depth is photographing raindrops. Just look at Soul Lighter's work and basically copy him. It definitely is a tool of composition that I use quite often. It just looks cool because of the depth and the potential mystery, so that your viewers have to kind of fill in the story on their own, which makes the photos more interesting. Here's a couple of photos taken again at the bus stop through a surface with raindrops, and clearly it adds an additional element of depth and mystery, which aids the composition. Number 5, steam. You can use steamy surfaces, steamy bus windows in general, to create a really minimalistic composition that yet somehow looks natural. There's another tip that I basically stole from one of the greats, Soul Lighter. I think that is how you pronounce his name. I still haven't actually found that out. But when you look at his work, you can see how he uses this, and whenever I'm going out during a time that some condensation, some steam can form on shop windows, bus windows, whatever, I try to look for those as a tool to help my composition. Here's again another example from one of my recent photo shoots, just taking photos of steamy bus windows. And of course, number 6 is going to be use reflections. Maybe the lamest tip in this whole thing, but still worth mentioning. Definitely a bit of almost a newbie trick in some aspects, but again, it's a reason that I love shooting in the rain, because everything reflects and it adds this nice, symmetry into your photos. It's a very simple trick to add an element into your photography that is visually pleasing, and that is why it is so popular. Okay, I don't entirely know why I hated reflections so much. It's about how you use them, just like anything. You can use reflections in a mirrored way, and you can use reflections in a more subtle way. Here's a couple of different styles of photos that feature reflections that I've taken over the years. And now a bonus tip, because I forgot to mention it. I know I only said 6 tips, but I just thought of one, and that is stop shooting for Instagram. What I mean is stop forcing your photos into a portrait crop format, because oftentimes when you're shooting in landscape format, that gives you more flexibility in composition. It gives you more freedom in composition. All of a sudden you have much more options, because you have more space where to place your subject. I just find it a lot more fun to compose your photos in this format. And of course, some photos are meant to be shot in this format, but at least for myself, at one point when I was a little bit too dependent on social media, and that one social media platform in particular, which is Instagram, it was starting to rot my brain into trying to force every single photo into this portrait format, which wasn't always the best choice for the scene. But when I started to give that up, when I just started not caring about Instagram, when I started shooting in landscape format, at least when it was appropriate, all of a sudden my compositions just got better, because they could get better. And now, even more extreme step, I got the X-Pan film camera, so my wide screen got even wider. And just making a mental switch has allowed me to practice more, and practice is the key of progress, obviously. So yeah, that's the 6 or maybe 7 tips, depending on your ability to count, on how to get better at composing your street photos. Let me know in the comments if you like these little tips-based episodes, listicles, whatever you want to call them. And of course, if you're new to this channel, I do a lot of these photography vlogs. All of these tips are actually pulled from each one of those vlogs. That's the footage that I've showed you in these videos as well. I like to make the vlogs a more informal type of videos. I just kind of randomly think of tips occasionally when I look at the footage from the day, but primarily I'm just trying to make it entertaining and share the photos. So if that kind of content is something that you would be interested in, I'll leave a couple of my favorite videos here as playlists. And I do also have a bunch of tutorial type content as well on this channel. So yes, like the video and enable post notifications if you want to see more from me. I have a lot more plans for all kinds of different videos. In this video 6, I'm retarded. So yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.